Last year, this happened on DC Rivals Hypercoaster at Movie World, and this is how the media reported about it.
Stoppage on a roller coaster at Movie World.
Oh my god. That is so dangerous.
Roller coaster got stuck. It was in a very precarious position.
Now, I'm not going to pretend that it probably wouldn't be alarming and frightening to be riding a roller coaster and then have it come to a sudden stop almost 60 meters in the air. For a member of the general public, that certainly would come across as concerning. I've worked as a roller coaster operator in 2 different theme parks, and I've been a roller coaster enthusiast for a lot longer than that. So today's video is all about why this is perfectly safe, why none of these riders were in danger, and why the news media is wrong to exaggerate incidents like this, and what the ride operators are trained to do in these situations. This is a breakdown of what causes ride stoppages and why they're nothing to be afraid of. In fact, they're a good sign that a roller coaster is safe. So, you're on the lift hill of a roller coaster and it's suddenly come to a stop. The first question that probably pops into your head is why? What's going on, and do I need to be concerned? So let's have a look at how a roller coaster works from an operator's perspective and what's happening in the system when the train comes to a stop. When you're at the controls of any modern roller coaster as an operator, you will almost always be operating the ride in what's called automatic mode. This means that most of what you actually do during normal operations is limited to a very small number of buttons, switches, and other inputs, and that the cycle itself is operated by the ride's computer system. This is unlike manual mode, which is usually used for maintenance purposes and gives the operator much more control over individual aspects of the ride. For example, Big Dipper at Luna Park Sydney operates with 2 switches for the platform gates, 1 switch for the air gates, a lap bar release button, and 2 dispatch buttons. So during normal automatic operation, the operator will only need to use a total of 6 buttons or switches. All of the other complexities of the operation, such as when the launch tires start and stop, are controlled automatically by a computer known as the PLC, or Programmable Logic Controller. Manual mode overrides the PLC's control and would allow for things to happen such as trains to be moved with lap bars or gates still open. This is usually only for maintenance purposes, and modern theme parks will never run a ride in manual mode with riders on board. During automatic mode, the PLC is programmed to follow a very specific sequence of actions during the ride cycle, using only those few human inputs, such as when the operator presses the buttons to dispatch. This sequence is controlled by thousands of sensors that monitor everything from the position of each lap bar and the position of each train on the track, to the response time and speed of the launch tires, and the temperature of different moving parts. For example, if the operator presses the dispatch buttons but a sensor detects that a lap bar is still open, the ride will not dispatch and might trigger a fault, stopping the cycle. In automatic mode, the PLC is always in control and the operator simply provides it with inputs to tell it when to perform certain actions. Now that's a lot of jargon and terminology, but the important thing to understand from this is that you're in the safe hands not just of the highly trained operators, but of a highly advanced computer system with thousands of sensors monitoring every aspect of the ride at all times. So now that we understand how a roller coaster operates, let's talk about how stoppages work. Roller coasters are powered by gravity and momentum. On most roller coasters, there is no actual propulsion method like a motor aboard the train. Instead, the train is lifted to the top of a lift hill or launched along a launch track, and then rolls along the track by converting its potential energy into kinetic energy. You probably learned something like this in 9th grade science. Now this also means that the trains of a roller coaster do not have onboard brakes. Since roller coaster trains don't have an onboard driver to respond to when the train needs to slow down or stop, or at least they haven't since the 1910s, the trains rely on automatic braking systems affixed to the track instead. So, what happens when the roller coaster train needs to slow down or stop due to some sort of issue or something being out of the ordinary? A roller coaster's track is separated into what we call block zones. Each block zone is a section of track ending with a method of stopping the train. This could be a brake run, a chain lift which can stop, or a launch track that can abort the launch sequence and stop the train. There's something else important that the end of a block zone will always have besides a method of stopping the train, and that's a safe evacuation point. Notice how roller coaster brake runs, launch tracks, and lift hills always have staircases, railings, and catwalks. As each train approaches the end of a block zone, sensors connected to the PLC are monitoring the block zone ahead of the train to make sure that everything is all clear for the train to continue. For example, the sensors will monitor the position of the train ahead to make sure that it has cleared the next block zone and hasn't come to a stop for some reason that could cause a collision. If everything is not clear, such as if the PLC has not detected the next train leaving the block zone yet, then the PLC system will immediately activate the method of blocking the train, bringing riders to a safe stop before any harm can come their way. This is why the evacuation point is also important. If the ride is not safe to be restarted, then the train will remain there, and riders will be safely evacuated by staff from that point on the ride. These block zones, and the thousands of sensors that monitor them, are the safety system that actually intentionally causes ride stoppages. When the computer detects that something is not right, it acts preemptively, stopping the train instead of allowing it to continue into a potentially unsafe situation. So now that we know why the system causes ride stoppages, the next question that we might ask is what actually caused the PLC system to trigger a ride stoppage? It's nice to know that the safety system is working, but do I need to be concerned that it was triggered in the first place? The answer, 99.9% of the time, is no. In fact, the majority of stoppages on most rides are actually completely unnecessary, and there was nothing wrong with the ride at all. But the PLC's logic is designed so that if it isn't 100% sure that everything is safe and ready to go, it will trigger a stoppage. One example of a common cause of stoppages that I have personally seen is encoder faults. In simple terms, the PLC had a software error that was causing it to fail to communicate with one particular sensor correctly. Instead of risking operating it without the information that that sensor provides, the ride stopped. If it had continued, the riders would have probably been perfectly safe. But since the PLC was unsure because it wasn't getting the necessary information from that sensor, it aborted the cycle. Other common faults include a gate not being closed correctly, or a train not having cleared the next block section. Neither of these situations are inherently dangerous. Maybe the gate is closed but just not resting on the sensor correctly. Or maybe the train is going to clear the next block section, it's just running a little bit slow. But the PLC is designed never to take risks. If you're on a ride and you get stopped on a block break or on a chain lift, it's important to remember that whether something is actually wrong with the ride or not, your train stopping was not a symptom of the problem, it was a preventative measure to make sure no harm could come your way if a problem did exist. But obviously, sensors can't detect everything. Let's take a look at the specific situation that happened on DC Rivals to see what the operator's job is while running a roller coaster and the role that they played in this stoppage. I'll be using my experience as an operator to explain step by step what happened in this situation, although keep in mind that I've never worked at Movie World, so their specific procedures may differ slightly. DC Rivals' well-reported stoppage occurred because a loose item, specifically a scarf, fell from a rider and became lodged in a wheel assembly. This could have risked becoming jammed in the wheels and causing the ride to lose speed and potentially valley, which basically means the train doesn't have enough speed to make it through the layout. It also could have caused damage to the wheel assembly itself, which, in the worst case scenario, could put the train at risk of derailment, which obviously would put riders in serious danger. While operators only have a few buttons to press on the console itself during automatic mode, they are constantly monitoring the ride and communicating with their operating team to ensure the safety of riders. In this case, the operator or one of the other team members spotted the scarf and the operator made the decision to stop the ride. On most roller coasters, an operator has two choices when it comes to stopping a roller coaster cycle. There is the standard ride stop button, which simply aborts the ride cycle. If this button is pressed, the trains will stop in place at the next block zone, but can usually be quickly restarted either by operators or maintenance, depending on the situation, once a fault or issue has been resolved. Quite simply, the stop button just stops the cycle from continuing. The other button is the emergency stop. The emergency stop cuts all power to the ride immediately. The trains will stop at the next block zone and the ride will not restart until it is completely rebooted and power is restored. The key difference between a cycle stop and an emergency stop is that a cycle stop does not cut power to the ride. Operators will use this in the case of a minor discrepancy that needs to be resolved, or more crucially, in the case of something like a fire, when riders need to be evacuated quickly. This is because in the case of an emergency stop, which is used in a dangerous situation where trains need to be stopped as quickly as possible, such as a guest encroaching on the track or a structural failure, the trains will not be able to be moved and the harnesses will not be able to be released. The evacuation will need to be performed manually. Therefore, the cycle stop is also used when an evacuation is time sensitive, such as in a fire. In the case of the scarf being lodged in the wheel assembly, as an operator, I personally would have pressed the emergency stop. While some might say that this is overkill, in the worst case scenario, the scarf could cause damage to the wheel assembly that could put riders in danger. Pressing the emergency stop immediately puts the riders into a safe position where the train cannot continue and there is no risk of the ride being unintentionally restarted until the hazard is removed. Then the operator will immediately contact maintenance, first aid, and supervisor staff to inform them of the situation and commence the evacuation procedure. Operators will usually assist with the evacuation as well. This will involve maintenance and operating staff ascending to the block zone where the ride is stopped, reassuring guests and informing them of the situation, and then manually unlocking the restraints and assisting them from the ride and down the evacuation stairs, where they'll be met by first aid and senior staff to handle any guests who may be injured or unwell as a result of the stoppage. At heights, guests will be provided with harnesses as they descend the stairs to prevent the risk of falling and will always be escorted by a trained staff member. It is completely safe. It's also important to note that staff will carry a remote power pack to unlock the restraints. This is because roller coaster trains require power to release the locking mechanism on your restraint, and this can only be provided in the station. So don't worry, your restraint is not going to unlock until the staff are there, unlocking your restraint with the power pack and ready to evacuate you safely. Just as a side note before we move on from the DC Rivals incident, let this incident serve as a warning to always follow loose item policies on board rides. Taking something like a hat, scarf, or mobile phone on board might seem harmless, and you might even be willing to risk losing or breaking your personal items yourself. But even something as simple as a scarf can risk causing damage to the ride and putting riders or onlookers in danger. Always follow operator and staff instructions about where to put your loose items, and never take an item on board a roller coaster unless staff say that it is okay to. So now that we know how roller coaster stoppages and evacuations work, what can we say about this DC Rivals situation and about why the way the media covered it was not correct? We can see that DC Rivals in this situation was stopped on a block zone with a safe evacuation point, which is where it's designed to stop. We can see that all the riders on board are safe and uninjured. So what does this tell us? Even before we know about the scarf or what caused the incident, we know that this stoppage was caused either by the PLC or the operator doing exactly what they are designed, programmed, or trained to do. This is an example of the ride's safety systems working correctly to prevent riders from potential harm. But the news outlets chose to cover this situation as if it was a ride failure, not simply a ride stoppage. When the media cover these situations in this alarmist fashion, it undermines the public's trust in ride manufacturers, theme parks, and ride operators. An uninformed viewer of this news story would see this as an example of DC Rivals being faulty or unsafe, when in fact it is an example of the ride's operators and systems working exactly as they are intended to, and proof that Mark Rides and Movie World's safety procedures are effective at protecting riders from potential harm. So next time you see a roller coaster stopped on the brakes or on the lift hill and you hear guests or the media telling fairy tales about how dangerous the situation is, stop and examine the situation and remember, ride stoppages are a sign of a healthy, well-maintained, safe roller coaster and a well-trained operating crew who have the rider's safety as their top priority. Thank you for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment with your thoughts and experiences, and while you're down there, please consider clicking the like button to help out against the YouTube algorithm. You can also click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when I next upload. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.